Management. We're going to call the meeting to order. The emergency management team of Upper Chichester Township. We take in attendance virtually. First, I want to start out with the agenda that indicates we're going to talk about COVID-19. Obviously, I've been sending out a number of emails to the team. Hopefully, you've been receiving them. Our information has come from multiple sources, as you see, not only Delaware County, Chester County, boards of health, even Interpol, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, U.S. Coast Guard, FEMA, PEMA, Department of Homeland Security, and the 3 states of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware's governor's offices. So I think we're well advised as to the COVID-19 status. But one of the things I wanted to discuss tonight was shelter considerations. As it relates to shelter considerations, if we would have to shelter in place, we have to think about distancing, masks, and hand sanitizer, and following the CDC guidelines. There's an impact on needed supplies in the county, and I'll defer to Carl here in a moment. The other thing we need to look at is if we're counting on non-essential businesses, those that are closed now, what contacts do we have if we need supplies from those? To my knowledge at this point, I don't have any information that we do need any from a PPE or any other equipment from a non-essential business. But it's just something to keep in mind as we move forward. I want to ask Carl to give an update on emergency responders and PPE. He's been working hard on that and has put in a request to the county. Carl, you want to take it from there?
Sure. Everybody can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. I hope I can. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Good. It means I'm transmitting. I guess I had a few things. Bill, did you just want me to talk about PPE right now, or what was your preference?
Yeah, PPE right now, and then we'll go back as we go forward on the old business or new business.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we are, we're still in the midst of this, obviously. And sorry, I had my audio off, I think turned down here in the beginning. I don't know what you related. I know that we're up to like 94 cases in the township, with 4 deaths was the latest count. So, we are still taking all the extra precautions that we need to, and that's for the protection of the EMS crews and the patients. We do have a new requirement right now that it's requiring us to make sure that the patients that we transport in the ambulance have masks also. So that's something new. We were told that when we got to the hospital, it was going to be a 1-for-1. So we put a mask on a patient, we were going to get one back from the hospital. And then I've since then learned that, the stuff is in such short supply at the hospital that that's probably not going to happen. So, we're kind of caught in the middle there. But, our supply levels of PPE remain okay for that's for EMS and for for everybody that we're touching in the township. I think police, fire departments, fire police, and public works. We have received some donations recently from community members, and we're talking, small donations, but also from the township. We just got, box of N95, KN95s for all those groups. And the latest and greatest is our, sort of by chance, I found that I was over at ENS over on Market Street to pick up some wire one Saturday, and I found they had respirators. They're the PN95s, and again, it was just by chance they had one, and I'd been looking for one. Can't talk with it on, so I'm not going to even try. But we were able to actually secure a purchase for all the EMS personnel. We bought like 35 of them, I think it was, uh, to cover all of our guys. So, it's a better level of protection for our people. The cartridges, we were also able to buy some extras because obviously they don't last forever, but a little more durable than the paper masks that we're kind of all used to seeing. And again, we're in this for the long haul. I don't see this going away anytime soon. So we're trying to incorporate that forward thinking in everything that we're looking at as far as the ambulance goes. So, and that's probably about it for PPE, I would say, Bill.
Okay, yeah. Other than I know you put in a request for reimbursement. We appreciate that for the fire departments and Booth One Ambulance. So thank you for your efforts there. Fortunately, we haven't spent a whole lot of money, and hopefully it will stay that way. Another consideration is, our response personnel, speaking of the ambulance particularly, but even the fire departments are using extra caution and responding to some of these calls. We just had a call at 1800 Mill Road, Lutheran Knolls. We've had multiple calls there today. I know the ambulance goes there routinely, so extra precautions are in order there and at Creekside Village, as we mentioned prior. And as we get into quarantine issues, that's another thing. As if any of us are quarantined, please send us an email so we know that, so we know not to count on you in case there is an emergency where we're looking for members of our team to be there on location and to assist. Something I learned today, general information that Aston Urgent Care has antibody testing available for asymptomatic and symptomatic persons. So there's a local location if anybody needs it. I know LabCorp and Quest are also doing testing. The Department of Health, this is Pennsylvania Department of Health, today announced on their website, Serve PA, that they're looking for individuals who are interested in contact tracing, individual and group contact tracing, individual or groups that may be interested in that. So that's what's happening. We're not obligated, nor have we had any requests from the Department of Health on the state level or a county level to assist in any way, other than, as Carl mentioned, utilizing the precautions that they set forth for emergency responders. Does anyone have any questions with regard to anything on the COVID-19 situation? Okay. Hearing none, a little different than last time. I want to give some information that might be more for public interest than other, but it's a sector update. And sector update, I'll go through a list of sectors: food, water, and shelter. The information that we have is that the volumes are strong, except for meat, as we've heard on the news, and they expect that shortage maybe to really be noticeable in the next couple of weeks as the supply chain is interrupted. Uh, Today, on the PEMA call, uh, apparently places are putting limits on dairy products. The state is requesting that there be no limits on dairy products, particularly milk in this case. There's no need to do that. And they're looking at the food bank guidance, which has been set out by the Department of Agriculture, as people would be in need of food and what kind of guidance and procedures should be in place for food bank guidance. So that's something that we had one offer from the American Legion. Jerry Brown, thank you. And we referred him to one of the food banks that the Legion wanted to assist with that endeavor. As far as health and medical, Carl already reported about the PPE inventory, and it's still tight in some cases. He mentioned the hospital, and that's something that be concerned about as we go forward. But it seems to be a little bit more out there in some places, particularly cloth masks. DHS has supplied some cloth masks to responders. So they're trying to keep up with the need, but there's still a lot to be done in that area. As far as energy, we know that the construction restarted in Pennsylvania, but there's concern there, even with individuals that are part of that construction team. And I'll add to this utilities, as far as energy is concerned, where the personnel shortage is caused by quarantine. Just the other day, we had a tree fire during one of those windstorms on Kingsman Road, and they couldn't even give us an estimated time of arrival. And then we know typically, when there's a storm and there's a lot of power outages, that there's a delay, but even more so now. So we need to keep that in mind, even from the emergency management perspective, that a personnel shortage, particularly as it relates to power, may become an issue. But then there was also, talk about Lutheran Knolls earlier, there was also a natural gas situation there, but the response by Transco was pretty quick. So that's a positive. Uh, it was a touch and go situation at first, valve malfunction, but was quickly remedied by the arrival of Transco. So that's important. The Public Utility Commission in Pennsylvania is monitoring all issues, particularly as it relates to communication. One thing was mentioned was there's been a 100% increase in cyber attacks on utilities. Not only do we have the storms to be concerned about, but we also have the issue of cyber attacks. So as it relates to energy and power, communications, Verizon is at 100% of capacity at this point, and 98% of their personnel are working from home. AT&T is at capacity, and they've actually had a 25% percentage growth in their capacity as they upgraded, and the FCC relinquished some broadband frequencies during the emergency. As it relates to transportation sector, they're struggling, and that's impacting on supply chain as we still see some of the basic items that we look for in our Rite Aids, grocery stores, etc., being a limited supply. Transportation is indicating they've lost 35% of revenue since the COVID-19 outbreak, and that there's all kinds of concerns with regard to truck drivers who are actually parking their vehicles rather than operating because well, first of all, they're concerned about going into hot areas like New York, as an example. So there's all kinds of issues there. One thing was mentioned was kind of interesting is that the truck registration for all our heavy trucks expires on May 31st. And as of that time, there was no extension given, even though there's been extensions given on a lot of other issues. So we'll see what happens there. The PA Turnpike, just a point of interest, all traffic is down 44%, and truck traffic is down 16%. Now, what that does, that affects energy. One thing that I'm familiar with, because most refineries are operating at less than full capacity, obviously, due to the oil glut and additionally COVID-19 and less traffic on the road. So that's caused layoffs and other issues. And in fact, we're operating probably about 70%, and some are operating at less than that, those refineries in the area. And jet fuel, which we supply from our one refinery there in Paulsboro, is actually only supplying about 20% of jet fuel, only because there's no planes flying. Now, this is of general interest too. I mentioned information from the Coast Guard. I'm on a weekly call with them. But vessel traffic, and I'll talk about the vessel traffic as far as ship traffic, is down 6.8%. But more importantly, we talk about supply chain and food. Fruit deliveries intake is down 16% as far as imports are concerned, and petroleum imports are down 67%. The only thing up, which is local, is Energy Transfer Partners. And for those who don't know, that's the old Sunoco and Marcus Hook. Their liquefied gas exports are up 97%. So they're one industry, one location that is benefiting by COVID-19. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, staying on the topic of traffic, uh, is concerned, and they're trying to allow drivers to drive over the necessary timeline that they normally would have under the motor carrier safety regulations in order to keep that primary supply chain moving. In addition to that, uh, truck traffic is down. You may see it on the highway, as I said about the turnpike. 16% of the overall traffic is truck traffic, heavy truck traffic. Um, it's going to be a real issue if we can't get moving, really. So this is something to look for your own interest, for the public interest, in reference to supplies and food. Even though there seems to be plenty of food, the problem is moving the food. So we'll see what happens there with regard to that. Reference to banking and banking, the banking industry is saying they're being hit by this. Uh, Obviously, with people not working and the unemployment rate being the way it is. Insurance Department reported from Pennsylvania that, as we probably have all seen, a number of the insurance companies are taking action to reduce rates during this period of time to help the consumer. So we'll see how that rolls out. With regard to new business, I just want to talk about the hurricane season, which could have another impact not only on supply chain, but something we need to be considering. And just today, I got the first alert on a disturbance that's in Florida at this time. Disturbance 1, advisory 1 of the hurricane season. It's in the Florida Straits. But looking at the projection at this point, it looks as though it makes a turn out into the ocean somewhere around Charlotte and continues on. So at this point, but it's early, and it just came out today at 1600, 4 p.m. It looks like we will not be impacted in our area. I did send out, which is, as I get these weather alerts, I did send out the high wind alert to you all a bit ago, just so you have an idea of when I get this information. I know we get it on public television as well, but also that when we get it directly from these meteorologists, I will continue to supply that, particularly now that we're in the hurricane season. As it relates to the impact on the supply chain, that could be another factor. Speaking of which, somebody's available. That's good. So as it relates to that, we'll see where it goes. On the question of the lifeline updates, I went over, as I said, food, water, shelter, energy. That's power and fuel. Department of Environmental Protection today spoke. No real issues there. They are concerned about response, and it could be response to an environmental incident. Again, back to the same issues that we discussed earlier in reference to personnel and what personnel would be available, and do we have the right personnel available? As you know, obviously, essential personnel have been working. Most people, a lot of people, I should say, have been working from home, from telework, which is probably a good thing in many ways, and not good in other ways. Because I was on a call the other day from the mental health perspective. They're very much concerned about people working from home because, first of all, people don't know I'm talking about the employers do not know what's happening at home. I saw today that child abuse reports are down because obviously the kids are not at school. So as a result of that, there's nobody monitoring child abuse from an independent perspective. Suicides are concerned. And maybe Carl can add to this too. Narcan has been needed more often. There's been more overdoses. There's been uptick in overdoses. So that's the other downside of what we're dealing with. And of course, the emergency responders, particularly the emergency medical personnel, are dealing with that as well. Carl, I don't know if you want to make a comment on that or not from what you're seeing from your perspective in reference to emergency medical calls.
Yeah, we've definitely been going through a period of time here over the last few weeks, like we said at the last meeting, um, that, and it's really statewide. EMS calls are down about 20%, maybe even a little higher, which is interesting. But they're actually, the numbers are, I think, up to 30% of the patients transported are COVID positive. But recently, within the last week or so, I know the county's looking at sort of an uptick in our volume and our call volume across the county, and like you said, relating to overdoses, particularly heroin. I mean, we've been running into that around here. So yeah, that's it's definitely it's a problem because you have to treat these patients, that they could potentially be COVID positive. And while you were talking, we just had a cardiac arrest here at the Walmart, and that's what I was thinking. It was probably related. It didn't say it was an overdose, but it might have been related. So definitely an uptick here recently in that. So.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that update. Okay, Carl, you want to just take it from there on the other new business, or you want to talk about the plan update? You have the floor.
Yeah, I didn't really have too much as far as the plan update. I'm glad you mentioned the call at Lutheran Knolls. I was over there, and we came. I think we came close to having to evacuate that facility. Um, and I know in previous meetings we talked about them and their management being involved and their plan for evacuation. It was slightly before I got there. I heard the request go out for management. They couldn't find anybody, I think, at the time until a maintenance person arrived. So I don't know how much help we would have gotten from their management as far as the evacuation if we needed to do that. But yeah, we are going to need to, monitor those things. It's possible that that we would get involved in a situation like that. But the other thing I was going to touch on was that we were involved in a conference today. Montgomery County Emergency Services had a 2-hour training session on COVID, and there's a lot of good topics covered. Um, they're talking a lot of specifics on EMS and ambulance, and for these calls like we just had with the cardiac arrest. Anytime we go out on a cardiac arrest call now, they're talking about covering patients with clear plastic so as not to induce a spread, an airborne spread, to endanger the crew. So they're talking about hooded shields for the stretchers, filtration systems for ambulances going forward. So a lot of, on the fly thinking and forward thinking about where we're going to have to go with this. And just some common sense stuff that, that we want to make sure that we're not missing things and in our protocols. I think they were using the term collateral damage while we're continuously thinking about, I got to put a mask on, I got to get gloves on, I got to get eye protection, I got to get a gown on, and not missing the normal, the common findings. You get a sort of a tunnel vision. So, but yeah, no, I mean, again, this is like we've said, we're it's interesting, and you hear this all the time. We're actually, I believe it, we're in a war. We're all in it, and it's strange because it's an unseen enemy. We don't physically see something, but it's out there. And the whole mental health aspect of this, I think, is bigger than we really know. Um, we're looking at all these numbers with the deaths and the infection rates, and people are afraid, and job loss and financial problems. Suicides have increased. It's tough. So, again, just to encourage everybody, take care of yourself, take care of other people, stay in touch with your friends, neighbors, relatives. We need to take care of everybody through this time, and we are really all in this together. So.
All right. Thank you very much for that update. I guess we're all getting it. You said about a call, which is good. We're collecting our information. That's why I said earlier we're getting information from a multiple number of sources. Really, for us, the impact of COVID on the community versus anything to do with the health considerations, other than our own. And again, if we had to activate a shelter situation, making sure we're following guidelines. I probably, at this point, I'm conference called out. I don't know how many you get a day. Everybody's using conference calls, so that's another thing that's happening, and we're using different technologies to accomplish that. But we'll keep the communications going. And if any of you ever have anything that you want to send out to the group, you have the email there. You can send it out to the group if you think even if it's of interest. Sometimes, like I said, with the food supply and some of the other things, it may have more of a personal interest than a public interest. But at some point, it may have a public interest. I don't know what our involvement would be, but other than informing the public of what we know. In reference to new business, before I turn it over to George, is there any other member that has new business or anyone from the public that has new business? Okay. Hearing none, George, you want to take it under general discussion? Hold on a second. I'll see if George Needles is there. I know he was having a technical issue. You don't see him on there, Al?
I don't see George on the list.
George is on the
May have
list,
to
but
get
he's
off.
muted.
George said he was only going to be on there just to keep the meeting going, not to interact.
George is here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, he wanted to give general discussion. Go ahead, George.
So we're on to general discussion. So the way that this works is if you are on the phone and you would like to speak, if you push *6, it will unmute you. Just state your name and your address, and then you'll be able to speak for 2 minutes. And if there's nobody, you guys can move on to the next part of your meeting. Just a heads up, we are having some issues with the audio on the broadcasts, but since these are being recorded, they will be replayed later tonight.
Okay, does any member of the team have any comment or question about anything we discussed? Okay, I'm hearing none. Well, let's keep safe as we discussed, and particularly follow Carl's advice. Now, the next meeting, I guess, will be dependent upon availability of the township site as we work through tonight. So it will be sent out ahead of time, so we'll know, and I'm sure he'll be publicizing the next meeting as he did this time on Facebook. So I appreciate everyone's participation. If we have nothing further, I guess we can adjourn. Okay, hearing none, thank you again, and hope to see you all in person soon. I think we get accomplished more when we're in person, but at least we're communicating. That's important, right? So, all right, we'll adjourn at 1900 hours. Thank you again. Have a good night.